Hey everyone, welcome back. What I'm about to share with you today might sound crazy at first. Actually, it definitely will sound crazy. But stick with me, because what we're going to explore is one of the most mind-bending connections I've ever come across. Imagine this, a 7th century holy book describing something that scientists wouldn't discover until the 20th century. Ancient texts from thousands of years ago hinting at concepts that would take us quantum physics to understand. Sounds impossible, right? Well, here's the thing. When you dive deep into quantum mechanics, and I mean really deep, and then you read these ancient sacred texts with fresh eyes, you start seeing something absolutely wild. Patterns, echoes, metaphors that shouldn't exist. Now, before we go any further, let me be crystal clear about something. These ancient texts are not physics textbooks. They don't contain equations. They're not predicting quantum mechanics. But what they do contain are descriptions of reality that are shockingly similar to what we now know about the quantum world. And that's what we're exploring today. Not whether ancient people had particle accelerators they didn't, but whether the deepest spiritual insights and the deepest scientific insights might be pointing at the same truth about reality. We're going to look at the Quran, the Bible, the Torah, the Vedas, and Buddhist teachings. And we're going to see how concepts like particle wave duality superposition, the observer effect, and quantum fields show up in different language, sure, but show up nonetheless. If this sounds interesting, hit that subscribe button right now, because this journey is going to get wild. And leave a comment telling me which tradition you're most curious about. Let's dive in. Before we get into the ancient texts, we need to understand what quantum physics actually discovered. Because without that context, the connections won't make sense. Classical physics, the physics of Newton, told us the universe was like a giant machine. Predictable. Solid. Objects had definite positions and speeds. Cause and effect worked in straight lines. The universe was essentially clockwork. Then we looked closer, way closer, at the subatomic level, and everything we thought we knew fell apart. Here's what we found. Particles aren't solid little balls. They're waves, or they're particles, or they're both. Depends on when you look at them. This is called wave-particle duality, and it makes no sense according to everyday logic. Nothing has a definite position until you measure it. Before measurement, a particle exists in what's called superposition, basically existing in multiple places at once, as a cloud of probability. Only when you observe it does it choose a location. This is the famous observer effect. Everything is connected. Two particles can be entangled, meaning what happens to one instantly affects the other, no matter how far apart they are. Einstein called this spooky action at a distance because it bothered him so much. The universe at its deepest level is a field, a quantum field from which all particles and energy emerge. Matter isn't fundamental. The field is. Reality isn't solid. It's mostly empty space and probability clouds. What we perceive as solid matter is actually 99.9% empty space with electrons buzzing around. Now, here's why this matters. These discoveries completely changed how we understand reality. The universe isn't a machine. It's more like a thought. It's interconnected, uncertain, and deeply influenced by observation by consciousness. And that's exactly what ancient texts have been saying all along. Let's start with the Quran, revealed in the 7th century in Arabia. Now remember, we're not claiming it's a science book, but there are some verses that, when you know about quantum physics, make you stop and think. The smallest thing, Dara, the atom. The Quran repeatedly mentions something called Dara. Traditionally, this word means something incredibly tiny, smaller than an ant, smaller than a grain of sand. Basically, the smallest thing you can imagine. Here's what's interesting. The Quran says that nothing escapes God's knowledge. Not even the weight of a dara. Not even an atom's weight in the heavens or earth escapes your Lord's knowledge. Yunus 10:61. Another verse says, "Whoever does an atom's weight of good will see it, and whoever does an atom's weight of evil will see it." Az-Zalzala 99:7-8. Now here's the quantum connection. In quantum physics, information is never lost. This is called the conservation of information. Even when particles seem to disappear or change their information, their quantum state is preserved in the universe. It doesn't just vanish. The Quran's insistence that even the tiniest action, The tiniest particle is recorded and never lost echoes this principle. Nothing disappears. Everything leaves a trace. And the idea that this Dara, this tiny particle, is under constant divine observation, that's remarkably similar to how quantum mechanics works. In quantum physics, observation isn't passive. The act of observing actually affects what's being observed. The universe seems to know when it's being watched. The principle of pairs. Here's where it gets even more interesting. The Quran explicitly states that everything is created in pairs. And of everything we created pairs that you may reflect. Ad-Dariyat 51:49. Everything in pairs. In quantum physics, we have particle-antiparticle pairs. For every particle, there's an antiparticle with opposite properties. Electron-positron, proton-antiproton, matter and antimatter. But even more fundamental is wave-particle duality. Every quantum object has two natures. It can behave as a particle, solid, localized, or as a wave, spread out, energy. Two opposite natures in one thing. The Quran's emphasis on person duality as a fundamental principle of creation lines up surprisingly well with this quantum reality. The universe is built on complementary opposites. Be and it is. The collapse of possibility. One of the most famous phrases in the Quran is Kun Fe Yekün, be and it is. When God wills something into existence, it happens instantly. No process, no delay, just be, and it is. Compare this to what happens in quantum mechanics. Before observation, a quantum system exists in superposition, a cloud of all possibilities at once. The electron could be here, or there, or anywhere. It's all possible simultaneously, but the moment you observe it, the moment you measure it, the wave function collapses. All those possibilities instantly collapse into one single reality. The electron is now here, not there. Here. The divine command be and it is can be read as a metaphor for this collapse. The infinite potential, all the possible states, instantly becomes one manifested reality, the observed state, through an act of will or observation. I'm not saying the Quran is describing wave function collapse, but the language, the instant transformation from potential to actual through divine will is strikingly similar to how quantum systems work. Let's move to the biblical tradition. The opening of Genesis and the Gospel of John give us some fascinating parallels. In the beginning, formless and void. Genesis 1:2 says, "The earth was formless and void, and darkness was over the surface of the deep, and the Spirit of God was moving over the surface of the waters." Formless, void, nothing yet solid or defined. This sounds a lot like the quantum field, the underlying field of reality from which all particles emerge. Before matter, before form, there's this field. It's not nothing, it's pregnant with potential. It's the source of everything, but it hasn't manifested yet. The Spirit moving over the waters is like energy rippling through the quantum field, ready to create. The word, logos and vibration. Here's where it gets really interesting. John 1:1, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God." The word logos in Greek isn't just sound. It's information. It's order. It's the creative principle that brings form out of formlessness. In quantum field theory, everything is vibration. Particles are just vibrations in the quantum field. Different frequencies create different particles. The universe is literally made of vibration. The word is the creative force that speaks reality into existence. That's not far from the idea that reality is fundamentally vibrational, structured by information and frequency. When God speaks, things come into being. When the field vibrates, particles appear. Faith and the observer effect. There's another fascinating connection in the New Testament. Jesus repeatedly emphasized the power of faith and belief. Mark 11:24. "Whatever you ask for in prayer, believe that you have received it and it will be yours." Now, this is often read as a promise about prayer. But look at it through a quantum lens. Belief-conscious intention has the power to influence reality. In quantum mechanics, the observer isn't passive. Observation collapses the wave function. Consciousness plays a role in determining what becomes real. The Bible's emphasis on faith, belief, and conscious intention affecting reality parallels the quantum idea that consciousness and observation aren't separate from the physical world, they're part of it. Again, I'm not claiming the Bible is describing quantum physics, but the idea that focused consciousness, belief, intention, observation can influence outcomes. That's both a spiritual teaching and a quantum principle. Now let's head east. Hindu philosophy, especially as expressed in the Vedas and Upanishads, has some of the most striking parallels to quantum physics. Brahman, the unified field. In Hinduism, the ultimate reality is called Brahman. Brahman is everywhere. It's the source of everything. It's unchanging, eternal, and infinite. Everything in the universe is a manifestation of Brahman. And here's the key teaching. Your individual soul, Atman, is identical to Brahman. Tat Tvam Asi, thou art that. You are not separate from the ultimate reality. You are it. This is almost exactly how modern physicists describe the unified quantum field. All particles, all forces, all energy, they all emerge from one underlying field. The field is primary. Particles are just excitations of the field, temporary ripples. Brahman is the ancient name for what physicists now call the unified field. And the teaching that you are one with Brahman, that's the same as saying you're not separate from the quantum field. You're made of it. You're a temporary pattern in it. Everything is one. Everything is connected. There's no fundamental separation. Maya, the illusion of solidity, one of Hinduism's core concepts, is Maya illusion. Not that the world doesn't exist, but that the way we perceive it is illusory. We see solid objects, separate things, permanence. But according to Hindu philosophy, this is Maya. The real truth is that everything is Brahman's own unified field, and the appearance of separation is an illusion created by our limited perception. Quantum physics confirms this. Solid matter is 99.9% empty space. What feels solid is actually electrons repelling electrons. Particles aren't solid little balls, they're probability clouds. Nothing has a fixed position or form until observed. The solidity we experience, it's a trick of scale and perception. At the quantum level, everything is fluid, uncertain, and interconnected. Maya is the ancient way of saying, what you see isn't what's really there. And quantum physics proves it. Cycles of creation. The breathing universe. Hindu cosmology describes time as cyclical, not linear. The universe goes through massive cyclesages called yugas, days and nights of Brahma. The universe is created, exists, is destroyed, and is reborn, over and over, eternally. Some modern quantum cosmology theories propose exactly this. Cyclic models where the universe expands and contracts repeatedly. No single Big Bang. Instead, an eternal cycle of creation and dissolution. Both ancient Hindu sages and modern cosmologists arrive at the same idea. The universe isn't a one-time event. It's a breathing, eternal process. Buddhism offers some of the most direct parallels to quantum mechanics, especially in its concepts of impermanence, emptiness, and the role of consciousness. Anatta, no fixed self. One of Buddhism's core teachings is anatta, no self. There is no permanent, unchanging essence to anything, including you. What we call self is just a temporary collection of physical and mental processes, constantly changing, like a flame or a river. Nothing has a fixed identity. This is remarkably similar to quantum mechanics. Particles don't have fixed identities. An electron isn't a solid little thing with a definite position and speed. It's a probability wave. It doesn't exist in a fixed way until observed. And Heisenberg's uncertainty principle says you can never know both a particle's position and momentum precisely. The more you know one, the less you know the other. There's a fundamental fuzziness to reality. Buddhism's teaching that nothing has a fixed, permanent essence. That's the spiritual version of quantum uncertainty. Reality is fundamentally fluid and impermanent. Sunyata, emptiness and the quantum void. Mahayana Buddhism introduces sunyata, emptiness. This doesn't mean nothingness. It means things don't have independent, inherent existence. Everything is empty of a separate, permanent self. In quantum field theory, even empty space isn't truly empty. It's seething with virtual particles popping in and out of existence. This is called the quantum vacuum or zero-point energy. The void is actually full of potential. Sunyata is the Buddhist way of saying, what looks solid and real is actually empty of fixed essence. It's all potential, all interconnected, all arising from an underlying field. Emptiness is an absence. It's the pregnant void from which everything emerges. Consciousness creates reality. Buddhism places consciousness at the center of experience. Reality as we experience it is constructed by the mind. The mind isn't passively receiving reality, it's actively creating it. In quantum mechanics, observation collapses the wave function. The act of conscious measurement determines what becomes real. Consciousness isn't separate from the physical world, it's entangled with it. Buddhism figured this out 2,500 years ago. Quantum physics is just now catching up. So where does all this leave us? Here's what I think is happening. These ancient traditions weren't doing physics. They didn't have particle accelerators or quantum equations, but through deep meditation, contemplation, and spiritual practice, they arrived at truths about reality that science is only now confirming. They saw that reality isn't what it appears to be, that separation is an illusion, that consciousness plays a role in shaping reality, that everything is connected at a fundamental level. And quantum physics, using completely different methods, has arrived at the same place. The Quran's emphasis on pairs and the smallest particles. The Bible's description of the formless void and the creative word. Hinduism's Maya and Brahman. Buddhism's emptiness and no self. These aren't primitive ideas. They're sophisticated insights into the nature of reality that align remarkably well with quantum mechanics. Physicist David Bohm proposed something called the implicate order, a hidden, underlying wholeness from which the visible universe unfolds. This implicate order sounds a lot like Brahman, like the Tao, like the quantum field. Maybe what we're discovering isn't that ancient texts predicted quantum physics. Maybe it's that there's a deep truth about reality that can be accessed through both scientific inquiry and spiritual practice. Two different paths to the same mountaintop. Here's the most important part. If quantum mechanics and ancient wisdom agree on anything, it's this. You are not a passive observer of reality. You are an active participant. Your consciousness, your attention, your intention, these matter. Literally. They influence what becomes real. The Quran says even the smallest action is recorded and matters. Jesus said belief can move mountains. Hinduism says you are Brahman. Buddhism says your mind creates your experience. And quantum physics says observation collapses the wave function. Consciousness is entangled with reality. You are the observer. And in the quantum universe, the observer doesn't just watch. The observer creates. So here's my question for you. If reality is this fluid, this interconnected, this responsive to consciousness, what are you creating with your attention? If you found this fascinating, do me a favor. Hit that like button. Subscribe to this channel. Share this video with someone who loves both science and spirituality. And leave a comment, tell me which tradition's insights surprised you most. Because these conversations matter. We're living in a time when science and spirituality don't have to be enemies. They can be partners in understanding the deepest truth about existence. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Keep questioning, keep exploring, and remember, reality is way stranger than we think.